nowhere near this area really. So we're going to begin our story in 1915. That was the year of Dwight Eisenhower's first visit to Gettysburg. Believe it or not, it was on a school field trip. You might know what school he was in 1915.
West Point.
West Point, yes, the West Point Military Academy. So back then, as they do today, the West Point Military Academy brings the entire Corps of Cadets onto the Gettysburg battlefield to explain to them what happened in 1863, to get them to think about what they would do if they were any of the positions that the officers of the battle were in, and what they might would do differently, or what they would do the same. So Dwight Eisenhower visited first in 1915. He graduated from West Point, was immediately then, of course, commissioned into the United States Army, and his career took him kind of all over the world. But in one of his early stops in 1916, that's when he met his future wife, Mamie Eisenhower. They met at Fort Sam Houston in Texas. She was there visiting a friend, happened to encounter Dwight Eisenhower. It was kind of a love at first sight. They were married, and then shortly thereafter, the United States entered what conflict? Which at the time they called the Great War, because it would be weird to call it World War I.
Yeah.
That would signal that there's a second one. But the Great War is underway. It's raging all across Europe. And in fact, Dwight Eisenhower, by 1917, is hoping that he is not sent to a place like Gettysburg, but instead he's sent to a place like France, where he would get combat experience. But instead, believe it or not, in 1918, he was given orders to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, where the United States Army had established the first tank training ground called Camp Colt. It was a military base of about 10,000 soldiers located on the fields of Pickett's Charge. So that is where Dwight and Mamie Eisenhower, as a young married couple and new parents, lived for a little over a year, beginning in 1918. So yeah, believe it or not, if you drove up the Emmitsburg Road right through the park today, you would see a huge tent city, and then believe it or not, right on the Confederate side of Pickett's Charge, there was a tank obstacle course in that area where he was, commanding troops and driving that obstacle course and learning how to use this new technology, tanks. So at the conclusion of World War I, of course, his career really begins to accelerate. It's involved in a lot of staff work. He's noted as being an officer who's really skilled at administration and managing people. And so throughout World War II, he rises through the ranks to become a 5-star general, and indeed becomes the supreme commander of all Allied ground forces in Europe during the Second World War. At its conclusion, in 1945, Dwight and Mamie Eisenhower are beginning to, believe it or not, think about retirement at that point. But of course, fully half of the story that we know Dwight Eisenhower for has not yet transpired. He leaves the military in the late 1940s and becomes the president of Columbia University, which takes them to New York City. Again, trying to follow this winding journey that leads them here to Gettysburg. New York City did not really agree with Dwight Eisenhower. He's from Kansas. He spent his time all over the United States and the world with the military. He's not much of a city guy, though, at his core. And he's not really into the whole academic community either. So he's only at Columbia University for about 2 years. In that time frame, Dwight and Mamie Eisenhower are beginning to think about where they're going to throw down roots and where they are going to retire. They've got a lot of friends in New York. They've got a lot of friends in Washington, D.C. They begin to look at a map, and they're looking at a place somewhere in between, and they begin to think about their time spent in 1918 at Gettysburg and how many fond memories they'd formed in the area and how much they liked the area. So in 1950, they purchased this farm. It's a 189-acre dairy farm that they kind of dream of kind of turning into the retirement home of their dreams. It had on it a quaint red brick farmhouse that they thought would just be perfect to remodel into the house that they really wanted. So they buy it in 1950. But about that same time is when Harry Truman asked him, that's the president, asked him to become the first commander of NATO. He accepts that offer, and that takes them not here to Gettysburg, but to Paris, France. While they're there, about 2 years later, that's when the Republican Party asks him to run for president. He does in 1952. They win that election, and that begins 2 terms in the White House. So this winding journey is also brought with it a number of delays in their goal of getting here onto this farm. So it's in 1953. They've owned it now for 3 years and haven't done anything with it. It's substantial that they decided to go ahead and begin the remodel project. So it was a red brick farmhouse. By the way, they are first-time homeowners in their, for him, early 60s and her late 50s. They've been married now for, about 30 years, and they've moved about 37 times before this point. And so they think, okay, let's begin this remodel project in 1953. The idea with the remodel was they're going to inspect the condition of the brick first. When they do that, they discover that beneath the brick is actually a log cabin that dates to the mid-1700s. They thought they bought like a Civil War era house, and they bought a house that was about 100 years older than they thought it was. And it was in really bad shape. So what was going to be a remodel became kind of a tear down and rebuild for the most part. They maintained a small portion of the house and built on in both directions. The project took about 2 years, and what they got was a 4,600 square foot house. For the two of them, it's 7 bedrooms and 9 bathrooms. But it's exactly what they wanted. You're standing in what Mamie Eisenhower probably thought was the crown jewel of the house, the living room. It's a place that she could display all of the stuff that they had accumulated over those years. I'll just point out a few things here in the room that I think signal to all of us today a couple of things about Dwight Eisenhower, his work, and their life. You're going to find throughout the house there's a lot of similarities probably to your house. Like you might have pictures on display in your home, pictures of your family members, but you might not have pictures signed by the royal family of England. That's kind of a big difference with the Eisenhower home maybe from yours. They've got a coffee table here. You might have a coffee table in your house. This one was a gift from the First Lady of South Korea in appreciation for what Dwight Eisenhower did in ending the Korean War. But I think the centerpiece of the room has to be the mantle around the fireplace there. It's made of marble, and it's significant because it was once on display in the East Room of the White House during the Lincoln administration. So it had moved out of the White House in the 1870s during a remodel project and had been sold actually a couple times to different individuals. And as the Eisenhowers began to think about leaving the White House, the White House staff actually purchased that for the Eisenhower family. They located and bought it for them. And Eisenhower always thought that Abraham Lincoln was a fantastic leader and really looked up to him throughout both his military career and his presidency. The other thing of significance I'll point out in this house that speaks to that winding journey is inside this cabinet here on the top shelf. I know not all of you will be able to see it, but definitely check it out while you're looking around after I'm done talking. On the top shelf there's a multi-paneled miniature version of the altarpiece of Ghent, the Ghent altarpiece. A really significant painting, some consider to be one of the first oil paintings in the world. Again, it's a miniature version reproduced in the 1940s, and it was a gift to the Eisenhowers from the King of Belgium in appreciation for his work in repatriating art stolen by the Nazis during the Second World War. You might have heard of The Monuments Men. It's kind of a famous George Clooney movie. Now today it's a fantastic book, and it's an actual story that took place in the Second World War. And again, I think that speaks to some work that the Eisenhowers did in their lifetime. Does anybody have any questions about anything I've talked about so far?
What were the rules for him allowing to accept gifts from other countries while he was president?
Yeah, so that has changed, and now they remain property of the government. That rule did not exist at the time, so they were able to bring things that they received as president here into his house. Yep.
Is there any history of the actual fireplace like great? Did that go with the mantle?
It did not. No, those were pieces they purchased on their own. Yeah. It's just the piece of marble. Okay, so I'll just briefly talk about the other rooms that you're going to see on the lower level. You're in the living room, probably the least used room in the house. It was only used for guests. It's kind of fitting that you all begin your tour here in this room. Dwight Eisenhower regarded it as being a little too stuffy, and you're going to see that as you check out the other rooms. They take on a much different feel because the next room is probably the most used room. It was the sun porch. And that's an opportunity for me to point out that the interior of this home feels quite a bit different from the way they experienced it because none of these shades were drawn really at any point. It was very light and airy in here. The sun porch especially so. They had a huge sweeping view to the east of the Gettysburg battlefield. It's where they ate most of their meals on TV trays, believe it or not, the former president and first lady in their years here from 1961 to 1967. We do keep the shades drawn for the preservation of the items inside. If you are really curious what it looks and feels like, the 3D tour on our park website has all the shades up. So that when the cameras roll through and that's how we have them all lifted for that. So we got the sun porch, and then you'll circle actually back through here to the entranceway where you'll see the formal dining room, again where the formal meals with the family, a lot of holidays were spent in there, and then you'll head upstairs to see kind of a sneak peek in their private life. And again, as you walk around, I want you to think about what someone would learn about you if they were to walk into your house right now as you left it, because you were walking through their house as they left it in 1967. So look for the cues. We furnished this place in detail to give you all those clues and cues to get an idea of what their life was like before and during their time here.
So after this presidency is
Yes, so they're permanently living here from 1961 to 1967. They began some travel in 1967 because they maintained another residence in Southern California as well. So they headed out in that direction. Unfortunately, his health took a turn for the worse while they were out there, and he spent a great deal of time in Walter Reed Medical Center in Washington, D.C. before passing away in March of 1969. Mamie then came back here and lived for another 10 years on her own.
And how'd the government get the house?
Great question. So in 1967, that is when the Department of the Interior approached the Eisenhowers and said, it's kind of a tradition that presidents get an opportunity to have a park site in their honor and their legacy or a part of their property. And the Eisenhowers decided if they were going to give something to the Park Service, they wanted it to be their primary home, the Eisenhower farm. And so they signed the paperwork in 1967, just a couple weeks before he embarked on that journey and left the farm. And as a kind of a joke at that point, again, this being the only property they owned on their own, Eisenhower signed it and then looked at Mamie and said, well, I guess we're back in government housing. Because it was technically government property at that point. The idea was that Dwight Eisenhower would live here the remainder of his life. When he died, Mamie would be moving out to an apartment that they had in Washington, D.C. However, after his death, she changed her mind and said, I actually like to stay here. The Park Service was not going to evict for former First Lady, and so they, believe it or not, issued her a permit to stay in this house. But at that point, the Park Service did begin to maintain the grounds outside after his death.
And how many kids did they have?
So they had 2 children in their lifetime. Their first son died at the age of 3. And then shortly after his death, John Eisenhower was born. You will see a portrait of him above the guest book in the entrance hallway. He lived until 2013 and had 4 grandchildren. And while the Eisenhowers lived here, John and his family maintained the adjacent property and home. So there was kind of an Eisenhower complex with both families here. It's still in private hands.
Private hands of the family or just?
No, they sold it to somebody else. I think 2 different families have lived in it since. Okay, so I'll be around here. If you have any more questions, you probably will. If you see something, again, it's a very detailed and intricately furnished house. Every little cabinet, every little space has a little detail in it. I'll do my best to answer any question you might have. If I don't know it, I'll just make it up right off the seat of my pants. So enjoy the Eisenhower home.
The other officer.
So that's John. So John graduated from West Point on D-Day, June 6, 1944, and was quickly assigned to Europe. And that is a photograph of the 2 of them in Germany, and that's John later on in his life and their fortune. He rose to Brigadier General.
He married Richard Nixon.
Yes, he married Julie Nixon.
That's why he's vice president.
That's John Eisenhower. That's their son. Yes.
What piece of furniture did Queen Elizabeth give him?
Their portrait is back there. The furniture.
I thought she gave him furniture.
I'm not wrong.
I do the same thing.
Yes, yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, basically.
Sweet plastic figurines. The tea service that's across the way. He collected, he's got these for him.
Only a matter of time. It says the seals will stay. Take it off.
All these cameras, if you want. They wasn't there.
Probably are one for the grandkids. You know it when you see that. her dressing area. This is gonna be her room. It's pink. I love this. I love this.
멈춰라. 아빠 문 닫아. 아빠 문 닫아. 어서 여기 같이 빗물자. Very cool.
I like the pink lampshades. Notice how it gives off a pink vibe.
Yeah, 5-star general sleeping in pink.
Yeah, he loves his wife. And I bet he has a good under here.
What is that anxiety?
You know what? That might be better than that. Yeah. A lot of times that's what happens when you put you down this way.
I guess so.
This is a nice guest area.
아빠 문 보고. Wait.
What this room
It
had.
said after you go down the stairs, it's supposed to be
What this room had television.
Oh, okay.
That's how they call the lady. Well, yeah, but the kitchen in these big houses is not made for like how they're made today, where it's a full, you know, it's an entertainment area. Alright, now this is his office.
Don't people be nice?
Oh. Have some fires in there.
Yeah. This is where he probably brings the guys that have smoke.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's
Wow.
That's where we were entertained as guests. It's a man cave.
That's the man.
Yeah.
That's his man cave.
That's nice, man.
Yeah.
That's where he is.
That was hers.
We did a lot of drinking there.
Oh, this was his office.